Differences like this are good opportunities for spouses to practice giving each other grace, for loving well, and seeking the truth and being committed to being honest with each other. These crises can be the very friction you and your spouse need to continue to grow and develop as an adult. Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. First of all, thank you to everyone that participated in our Sextember challenge this year. There were over 1,300 couples. Can you believe it? 1,300 couples that completed the Sextember challenge. Very impressive. Some of you sent me your before and after photos along with your stories. They were so inspiring. I want to mention one couple in particular that I found inspiring. He has been deployed overseas for the last 9 months in the military, and keeping the spark alive while apart has been a struggle for this couple. This couple decided to do the Sextember challenge anyway. They adapted it to make it work for them. They sent me their before and after photos, which are screenshots of them on a FaceTime call. Selfies taken together in Be Real style. Anyway, this is what he said. Having the little prompts to do things for one another, ideas to talk about, and activities to do together has immensely improved our ability to maintain our romantic relationship long distance. We are much more loving and open with each other, especially after the Sextember challenge. And we look forward to the experience of having your app as an integral part of our daily lives after I get home. Although our next big challenge isn't for another few months, I encourage you to do something every day, however small, to be intimate and keep your marriage hot. Now, you can tell that I get goosebumps with the inspiring stories that I hear from you regularly, and that's one of my favorite parts of my work here at Get Your Marriage On. What if you'd be willing to come on my podcast and share your story and inspire others too? I'd like to do a series of podcast episodes in the near future featuring not sex experts per se, but everyday special people like you. Do you have a story to tell about how you and your spouse grew or are growing to develop sexually or overcome something that you are stuck on sexually for a long time? Or maybe some things that you learned that you wish you had learned sooner? I'd love for you to share your story and sextimony with others. Check out the show notes for instructions on how to get in touch with me about this. On our website, we have a form for anonymous question and answer under the resources section. I appreciate those that send in questions. They are really good questions. Today, I wanted to address 6 of those questions that you've asked me over the past month in this podcast. Ready? Here we go. The first question says, I am a faithful Latter-day Saint woman and follower of Christ. I have a problem. I have a fetish for something that doesn't hurt anyone, but is gross. I've had it as long as I can remember, no clue why. I love when my husband does it to me in bed, but I am so ashamed that I like this that it's very rare I allow myself to be in the mood. I can't imagine sex without my fetish. I feel it's okay for me to have this fetish as long as I keep the shame. The shame makes me a good person, but it's costing me. I can't be the only one with this problem. What can I do? I'm so glad you asked me this question. I'm sure there's many others listening to this podcast that can relate to feeling ashamed for something that they like done in bed. And I understand that you find value in feeling shame about this, but perhaps I can invite you to look at it a little differently. A big aspect of intimacy is a willingness to share yourself, your whole unapologetic, raw, imperfect self with another person that matters to you. In fact, the more willing you are to expose your mind and receive your spouse's mind, the more capable of loving you become. And that's the point of marriage, I believe. It's to grow you up to become more capable of loving someone, including yourself. It's almost as if we have this innate loneliness that is cured when we finally let someone else in. What if your fetish may be gross in one context, but the very thing that builds that bridge to close the gap of intimacy with your husband in a different context? Let me give you an example. Let's take French kissing as the example. As a kid, you're probably like, "What? You want to put your tongue in my mouth? Gross." And for good reason. You don't go around letting others just put their tongue in your mouth. That'd be gross. So when you actually do French kiss your special someone, it's more meaningful because you're sharing your quote unquote gross with them. But however, it's not gross because in that context, you're sharing yourself and accepting them, and they're accepting you in that. Some people have a fetish around their spouse farting during sex. I promise it's a thing. Or there's anilingus, which is stimulating the area around the anus with your tongue. Gross in any other context, I know, but it's not so much that they like the smell of their flatulence or the idea of their spouse licking their bum. But it's the idea that their spouse is comfortable enough not to hide around them. That's what they find alluring. It's that they're willing to be raw and open and be fully who they are in front of you. The same goes with why men find squirting so exciting. For some, squirting sounds gross. Releasing lots of fluid all over their partner on the bed sounds like wetting the bed and then laying in the puddle and pretending to enjoy it. Yet, in a different context, that very act takes on new meanings. One possible meaning for a lot of husbands is that in order for a woman to be willing to squirt, she's going to allow herself to be aroused, touched, and ultimately surrender and completely let go, to be carried away by the sensations and just allow it to happen. It requires trust and confidence. And for many women, it's not necessarily a more pleasurable orgasm than a non squirting orgasm, but many men find it deeply meaningful for their wives to squirt because of what it represents. It represents this idea, this thought, that she would be willing to expose herself to be raw and open and let go like this. And that is really hot and very intimate and a big turn on. So, dear woman who wrote this question, I don't know the nature of your fetish, but I do encourage you to integrate it into the whole of who you are rather than pretending it's not there or trying to shame it away. Appreciate it for its ability to turn you on, and in the right context, that it can be a bridge that brings erotic excitement and closeness to your spouse. Now, if you're curious about anal play or prostate stimulation, you're in good company because I have had many questions about this come through the anonymous Q&A recently. So I'm going to address 3 of them today. The first one is this. I've seen a lot about prostate play stimulation. It piqued my interest after hearing how intense the orgasm is. Is there a guide to starting this and possibly explaining the use of male vibrators? Yes, there is. It's in the free Intimately Us app under the Learn section. There's a category of in-depth how-tos, and one of these how-tos is all about prostate massage. In summary, men can feel a lot of sexual pleasure from stimulating the prostate. The prostate gland sits inside the root of the penis, and it is responsible for creating much of the fluid in ejaculate. When a man is sexually aroused, the prostate is activated. It gets engorged a little bit. There are 2 ways to stimulate the prostate during sex, the indirect way and the direct way. Let's talk about the indirect way first. Some men really like it when their wives apply a lot of pressure on their perineum. This is the soft space of the pelvic floor region between the testicles and the anus, that skin. Anyway, right before orgasm, she puts a lot of pressure there, and that's because it applies pressure indirectly on the prostate. And as a pro tip to the ladies, if you're giving your husband a hand job, for instance, you can situate yourself to where you can put your knee between his legs under his testicles and apply pressure there with your knee as you stimulate him. You can also stimulate the prostate directly through the rectum. Now, for this to work, he needs to be really relaxed. You'll need to put in a lot of lubricant. Put it on your finger, or put a condom on your finger, or put a glove on your hand first, and then put lubricant on that. And be very gentle and slide it into his rectum a few inches. You can feel the back of the prostate, actually. It's kind of a walnut-shaped gland. And you can use like a come hither motion or slide your finger back and forth left and right to stimulate the prostate through the rectal wall. Now, men can actually ejaculate just from that kind of touch alone. That can be pretty stimulating. He doesn't even need to be erect in order for him to ejaculate there. But stimulating the shaft and the head of his penis with your other hand or tongue at the same time adds a lot more intensity to his pleasure. And there's male vibrators out there that are an option. But for many men, it's something that they need to get used to. So if you want to give it a try, give yourself a few rounds before deciding against it. Now, all this said, I should note that this kind of play is not for everyone. Not all men like it. Not all wives are eager to go trying this too. That being said, our bodies are incredible creations, and I believe God has designed us to feel sexual pleasure in multiple ways. And the reason why sexual pleasure is so important is that it facilitates bonding and closeness. So, if it's something you're both willing to try and you both can find a lot of pleasure in it, you'll find a lot of benefit to your marriage for trying. Give it a try. Okay, the next question is related. He says, I'm a happily married heterosexual male. I enjoy indirect and direct prostate stimulation, something that my wife does not have a problem with. But I struggle with whether it's a sin or not. What do you think? Good question. And I think this comes back down to the is it okay to do blank in bed type questions. Now, there's always, you can find it online. You just search, you're going to find people that tell you that prostate stimulation is a sin, and you're also going to find people that say prostate stimulation isn't a sin. Each side is going to have their reasons that are valid. But I would recommend that you don't just take what they say at face value, but think about it for yourselves and make the right decision for you. What I try to tell people is you want to live by principles rather than rules. For example, we have a rule in our home that we don't wear shoes in the house. Perhaps it's because of my Japanese upbringing. But I want our kids to live by the principle, not just by the rule. So the principle I want to teach them, instead of just like you don't wear shoes in the house, it's more like this is a way we help keep the floors of our house clean. And when our floors of our house are clean, the whole house stays clean. In this case, there are 3 principles I would recommend you consider as you think about whether or not prostate stimulation is a sin or not for you. The first is asking yourself if this act would bring you closer or further away from your spouse. As Jesus taught, you will know them by their fruits. So what is the fruit of this particular sexual act for you in your relationship? The second principle is couples that want a vibrant sex life for the long haul of their marriage need healthy doses of newness, freshness, and novelty. I've gone in depth on this principle in previous podcasts, explaining that novelty need not always mean new sex positions or new sex acts, but can be about going emotionally deeper with the person you're with. But new sex acts, like prostate stimulation, could add some freshness and excitement to the marriage in a healthy way. So that's that principle. You need newness if you want your marriage to stay vital for the long haul. The third principle is about your values around the purpose of sex. In my opinion, God is very clear about his guidelines for sex. It's to be enjoyed by a man and a woman lawfully married. But that's a pretty broad boundary. Within that, there's a lot of room to explore. And God doesn't command us in every minute detail of our lives because he expects us to grow and learn from our own experience within the bounds that he has set. There's plenty of room to explore and play within these sexual boundaries. Both people consenting is really important. And it seems like your wife is choosing to engage in this play with you. So I recommend you explore within these bounds. You have a big blank canvas that you can enjoy and create a sex life that you and your wife can both really enjoy by following these principles. The next question is related, and it goes like this. My wife and I have a fulfilling sex life, but I'm much more adventurous than she is and would like to explore prostate massage and potentially pegging. She's told me that she's not interested in receiving anal sex, which is fine by me. I'm not bothered about that. But I'd really like to explore her penetrating me. How do I approach talking about the subject with my wife, as I know she will be reluctant to try it? I like this question because it highlights another principle about working together as an intimate team and using love and persuasion instead of manipulation. Because we're on this topic, let me explain real quick for those that are interested to know. Pegging in this man's question is anal sex done by a wife on her husband, usually with a sex toy or a dildo. She could wear a harness that straps onto her hips and then connects to like a dildo, so it looks like she has a penis, and she penetrates him. It's like a reversal of roles that some couples find very humbling and very erotic. One woman that plays this way with her husband once told me that she was surprised at how much effort goes into thrusting, and it gave her a deeper appreciation for the times when her husband is busy thrusting her during sex. You can see also how some women would be reluctant to try this form of play. It seems far outside their realm of experience of what quote unquote sex should look like, and they feel uncomfortable with the role reversal, or the idea of butts in sex, or any number of things about it. It's important to give space for your spouse who may not share the same enthusiasm for sexual turn ons without becoming demanding. So much of building an intimate relationship is about creating room for two people in the marriage. This requires honesty, a commitment to truth, and solving the paradox of seeking what you want sexually balanced with what your spouse wants sexually. Some people err on the side of being too pushy or demanding. Others err on the side of living small or never voicing their desires or folding into the other person's desires resentfully. Finding that balance or that Goldilocks zone is really important and will facilitate your growth as an adult. I think many couples live far below their privileges because they're not willing to push themselves a little. In this case, pushing yourself might be getting over the fear of rejection of something you might find erotic. It might mean asking her directly if she's willing to try it and see where the conversation goes from there. I sense from your question that you're a bit hesitant to ask because you're either unsure about the act yourself or already have a sense of how she'll respond and don't like the feeling of what it'll feel like after she responds. And that's okay too. Your wife doesn't need to agree with you. So many couples get bent out of shape because their spouse won't share the same perspective or preferences with them. So here's the challenge. Can both of you create a marriage where there's room for two people to have different perspectives and preferences and both of you to thrive? That's where you want to get to. All right, here's the last question that I'll be answering today. It says, my wife has orgasms very, very rarely. I want to close the orgasm gap in our marriage. I think if she had more orgasms and got more out of sex, she'd want to have sex more often. However, she's only comfortable with intercourse in the missionary position. I guess you can call us traditional or vanilla. I thought something was wrong with us until I learned that only a small percentage of women actually have orgasms from penetration, and most women need clitoral stimulation, often direct clitoral stimulation. It's frustrating to me, though, that she isn't willing to try oral stimulation, sex toys, or other forms of sex that I read that help women have more pleasure in sex. She says she's uncomfortable with other ways. What should I do? It's true that men get just as much, if not more, satisfaction out of their sexual encounters when they know their wives are enjoying the sexual experience. When you read journal accounts of men writing about their peak sexual experiences, 9 times out of 10, these peak sexual experiences are revolved around the pleasure their wives experienced in that encounter, which I find quite inspiring. I think also that men have a fear or insecurity about not being man enough for their woman in bed, whatever that might mean for you. I went to a business conference once, and once the guys in my group learned that I'm a marriage and sex coach, it opened up a lot of exciting conversations. One man leaned over and told me that his wife averages 2 to 3 orgasms every time they have sex, and he said it with so much pride and satisfaction. For him, it was a very important sign of his manliness. For the others in our group that heard that, and if they feel a little insecure themselves, they could interpret that as maybe they're not as manly as this man is because their wives aren't having the same quantity of orgasms as this man's wife reportedly has. We tend to manifest in life what we think about the most. The reality is everyone on the planet has insecurities in one way or another. Having insecurities is one thing, but whether you feed your insecurities and give them too much power, well, that's another thing. A lot of men are offended at their wife's refusal of his offer to give her sexual pleasure, but sometimes the wife is turning him down for a good reason. If your wife can sense that you're insistence on her orgasm or pleasure is there partially to prop up your own ego. In other words, for you to feel like you're man enough because she's having orgasms, then it's going to be very difficult for her to want to be fully engaged with you sexually, because doing something for the other person's ego is anti-erotic. As David Snarch, a famous sex therapist, put it succinctly, he said, "You can prop up your husband's penis or his ego, but not both." It's important to seek to understand before seeking to be understood. Can you have conversations with your wife to understand her perspectives better? Maybe her experience, her point of view. Perhaps she herself has insecurities about her own sexuality and her body in general, so the idea of toys or other forms of intimate touch are really hard for her to accept. In any case, what your spouses need the most in times like these is a champion and not a critic. Differences like this are good opportunities for spouses to practice giving each other grace, for loving well, and seeking the truth and being committed to being honest with each other. These crises can be the very friction you and your spouse need to continue to grow and develop as an adult. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please share it with your married friends. They will thank you for life. If you have a question you'd like to ask, you can find it on my website under the resources section under Anonymous Q&A. If you'd like to go even deeper in your relationship, please sign up for my program. It's called Next Level. You'll find it on my website too. And my team and I would be happy to work with you and to go deeper in your relationship, to help you with your relationship dynamics so that you can have the best sex you can possibly have as a couple. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in accelerating growth in your marriage, either sexually, emotionally, or spiritually, I want to invite you to work with me in my affordable coaching program called Next Level. More information about Next Level and my fun and sexy apps for couples are available at getyourmarriageon.com. Please also don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And be sure to tell your married friends. I promise, they will thank you for life. Now go get your marriage on.